Well, hello. Welcome to Stereo 3D Productions and this updated 3-way VorpX setup guide for Resident Evil 7. That's right, we're going to propose 3 different ways of running this game in VR. A simple one, a slightly more complex one that yields better results, and finally, a very complex one that will yield the very best results possible. Before we go on with those, I do have to point out how the VorpX guide series goes. Now, for those of you who are in a hurry and don't want to sit through any video, we've got you covered. Our instructions will be available in a PDF document linked in the description of this guide. Go ahead and grab a copy if you're in a hurry or need reference after watching this tutorial. These videos are always subject to updates. If you see the tag outdated in the title of this video, it means we've remade a more current version of this tutorial. If you see the tag updated in the title of this video, it means this video is still current, but we've made a follow-up with more information. Either way, if you see those tags in the title, look at the top of the description for a link to the updated tutorial or the follow-up video. Resident Evil 7, a game that caught the channel by storm back in 2017 when I first made a setup guide and by now has become the single most popular video in the series. It's clear that a lot of you are interested in playing this game in VR on your PC, and it's honestly a shame, a tragedy that Capcom never delivered on any VR other than PlayStation. See, I had a chance to try this game on the PlayStation, and while I was somewhat impressed by how such underpowered hardware could even run this game in VR, I also found out that we on the PC haven't been missing out on much. This game has resolution issues. It has a lot of resolution issues. Not only is it packed with a terrible set of anti-aliasing filters, but it seems that the game also runs below the advertised resolution. For example, if you run at 1080p with a resolution scale of 1, it looks as if the game was rendering at 900p and getting upscaled. This is no different on the PlayStation. In fact, it's rampant. In addition to that, on console, the resolution scale gets changed dynamically while you're playing to compensate for bad frame rates. Most often, it gets lowered by a good factor. If you thought this game was blurry through VorpX, wait until you see it on a vanilla PlayStation. Furthermore, another discovery I made is that the PlayStation VR version of this game plays seated and only supports the gamepad. That's right, to my great surprise, Resident Evil 7 VR is not room scale. That's where I realized the value of this VorpX setup. Not only will you get higher image detail on most setups, but you're essentially playing the game the exact same way that you would on its original VR counterpart. The VorpX setups we're about to show today raise the bar well past what the console is capable of in terms of graphics, all while giving you a very similar gameplay experience. We're going to go from the simplest solution all the way to the most complex. I'll show the easiest method first, and then show you how to modify those settings to get the second method working, and finally, I'll do the same for the third, more complicated method. The reason why I'm showing multiple methods is that 2 of these depend on third-party tools that need to be kept current. If Capcom were to ever intentionally break support for these again, and they have multiple times in the past, you can fall back to the first method while you wait for the third-party tools to receive an update. Fortunately, as of today, all these tools are in fact up to date. Before we go over our 3 methods, we've got a few things to get ready in order for any of this to work. This is one of those games we can launch directly in VR, even the first time, so that's what we're going to do. Launch VorpX, start your VR runtimes, either Oculus or Steam VR, and finally launch Resident Evil 7. VorpX should hook to the game and you'll see it in your headset. Notice that VorpX will tell you the game should be restarted because some settings have been changed for you. We're going to do that, but before we've got 2 things to take care of. First, we only want VorpX to change our game settings this one time, so we're going to disable its ability to do so in future runs. Open the VorpX HUD by pressing the Delete key and head into Direct VR Settings, where you'll want to turn Change Game Settings to Off. Hit OK and save. VorpX has already changed the settings it needed, and so with this configuration, VorpX won't revert things we're going to change in the next step. Before we close out, let's open the game menu and go on the game's graphics settings. Keep in mind the menus will be completely busted in VR, but there's an easy way around this. Press your middle mouse button to use VorpX's Edge Peek feature, which will let you see the user interface correctly. We have the possibility of 3 screen resolutions. 1600 by 900 for low, to be used on systems with a GTX 1060 or greater, 1920 by 1080 for medium, recommended for GTX 1080 or greater, and finally 2560 by 1440 for high, suitable for those with an RTX 2080 or greater. Keep in mind the resolutions for the third method shown in this video are different. We're going to cover those in the instructions for that method. Also note that 2560 by 1440 may require using virtual resolutions if your desktop monitor is running at a lower resolution than that. We're going to show how to do this in a moment. Now, for the settings that we're concerned with, settings that will be shared between the 3 methods we're going to demonstrate today, display mode should be on windowed, set field of vision at 90, make sure VSync is off and that rendering method is on normal. For the resolution scale, this is going to depend on the resolution you picked. If you're at 900p, set this to 1.2. If you're at 1080p, set this to 1.1. And finally, if you're at 1440p, set this to 0.9. We've done tests running at 1080p with a res scale of 1.4 versus running at 1440p with a res scale of 0.9. Not only did the latter look much better, but it also ran faster by about 50%. Yes, res scale improves image quality, but it's poorly optimized and inefficient. So if you're getting poor performance, this is the first setting you want to lower. Texture filtering should be fine on medium, and you can try either medium or high for texture quality. Mesh quality should be on low, but feel free to try medium as the performance trade-off isn't too bad. Set anti-aliasing to SMAA, it's the only one that will damage your visuals the least. Disable motion blur, this is very important for VR. Set your effects rendering on low. Depth of field to off, the game's anti-aliasing is already blurry enough as it is. Put shadow quality on medium and turn dynamic shadows off. Next, turn ambient occlusion off, that can cause visual problems with VR. Set volumetric lighting to off. This is unfortunate because volumetric lighting is pretty, but having used both, I can assure you the visual gain is useless for VR and actually will cost you a few of the frames we desperately want. Last, set reflections, subsurface scattering, and chromatic aberration to off. We're done with the graphics settings. Go ahead and leave this menu, which will prompt the game to save your settings. Press your middle mouse button again to disable VorpX Edge Peek and go back to normal. Remember, we're going to have to cycle this feature every time we open the menus. Go ahead and quit the game. We're going to restart it later while covering each method. Keep in mind these settings may be low, and you would notice if you played on a screen, but in virtual reality, what really matters is geometry. Yeah, a few of the effects would look fancy if they were raised up, but they're the furthest thing from indispensable. The game looks amazingly convincing in VR as it is with these settings. It seems that the developers would agree because the configuration they use to run this game in VR on the vanilla PlayStation is substantially lower than what we've got here, especially when it comes to res scaling, mesh detail, and texture quality, yet the game is still quite enjoyable on that system. What we have here raises the bar on those settings, all while preserving a decent frame rate with a constant resolution throughout. Speaking of resolutions, it's possible that some of you may be running their desktops at 1920 by 1080 while having hardware good enough to run the game at resolutions higher than that. If you intend on using the high resolution in any of the 3 methods, but have a desktop set to 1080p, we're going to want to switch that over to 1440p for things to work correctly. Fortunately, even if your monitor doesn't support 1440p, we can forcibly enable it by using either AMD's Virtual Super Resolution or NVIDIA's Dynamic Super Resolution features. Of course, if your desktop resolution is at 2560 by 1440 or greater, or if you don't plan on playing the game at higher than 1080p, disregard this step. To enable NVIDIA DSR, do the following. Open the NVIDIA control panel by right-clicking Empty Desktop Area and clicking NVIDIA Control Panel. Go to Manage 3D Settings. Under the Global Settings tab, set DSR factors to 1.78x. Close the NVIDIA control panel. Now, to enable this on AMD VSR, do this. Open Radeon Settings by right-clicking Empty Desktop Area and clicking Radeon Settings. Select the Display tab. Click the Virtual Super Resolution tile to turn the feature on. Exit Radeon Settings. And finally, for both cases, to switch to 2560 by 1440, right-click on an empty desktop area again and select Display Settings. Select your primary display in the window, make note of the current resolution setting, then change it to 2560 by 1440. Hit Keep Changes at the next dialog and hit OK in the Display Settings screen resolution window. Keep in mind your desktop will look slightly blurry with this resolution boost. This is normal and it won't cause any damage to the game's graphics in VR. Also, you can return to your original resolution after playing the game. Now, if you plan on playing with the first, simplest method, just keep watching. If you plan on playing with the more complex second and third methods, which improve field of view and aspect ratio respectively, skip directly to the second and third method section of this video. The first method is probably the most plug-and-play setup you can get. It's very quick and it's sure to get you playing the game at a very decent resolution with no third-party tools and no freeform fuckery. I'll be honest, you don't even have to open anything. At this point, after quitting out of the game, all you need to do is reload it, either start a new game or load an old one and start playing Resident Evil 7 in VR. It's just that simple. Once you've loaded into your game, wait for the cutscenes to finish and find a peaceful spot to stand in, no enemies, no distractions. Press the delete key to bring up the VorpX settings. I'm going to show you the relevant settings we've got in the VorpX HUD because there is one thing I recommend changing. First, in main settings, you'll find 3D separation strength to 1.0. Next, press on More Stereo 3D Settings to expand that section. You'll notice that 3D FOV enhancement is at 0.8. Now, we're going to do something that seems weird here, but hear me out. Set camera height modifier to 0.15. You'll see why in the Issues and Tricks section of this guide. Finally, another set of relevant settings would be under Image Settings, where image zoom is at 0.68, HUD scale goes to 0.5, and HUD depth at 0.66. That's about all the relevant settings that come up with this stock profile. Only one setting needs to be changed, but I covered them all for documentation purposes, or if you ever need to revert to this setup. Now, if you're going to be playing with this method, you're free to go ahead and close out of this video and play Resident Evil 7 in virtual reality. However, if you have some extra time, I highly recommend skipping to the Issues and Tricks segments of this video. You'll notice there's a prominent cutout around the hands and weapon models in this game, and I found a weird but effective solution to work around most of the problem. I'll be showing you the solution in that section of the video. If you plan on using the second and third methods of running this game, keep on watching. The third method's instructions will depend on a few things we're going to cover in the second method. Alright, now we need to raise the bar on that setup. It's time to demonstrate the second and third methods. I'm going to be showing methods 2 and 3 in the same segment because in order to use the third method, you have to first learn how the second one is set up as well. It's well known that VorpX's 3D FOV enhancement setting causes a heap of visual glitches, and we've got a way to avoid this. For the second method of running this game, we're going to use nearly the exact same setup, except this time, we're going to force the field of view all the way to 120 degrees by using a tool called Resident Evil 7 FOV Trainer by Ruined Eraser, also known as Civil Wolf. Before we get started, I do need to give huge credit to Ruined Eraser for staying on top of the FOV trainer. Capcom have this habit of pushing updates that break the support for the FOV trainer. I've come to strongly believe that this is intentional on their part, by the way, and every update that breaks the FOV trainer, it only takes a brief amount of time for Ruined Eraser to pull through with an update to his app. This tool is crucial to improving the VR output of this game with VorpX, and we couldn't pull these tricks off without Ruined Eraser's work. Huge thanks to his efforts at keeping RE7 playable for absolutely everyone. Now, the only reason this part of the video will be a bit painful is because the FOV trainer registers as a false positive on Windows Defender, and we're going to have to work around that. The way the field of view trainer works is it modifies the contents of the game's runtime memory payload in order to forcibly change the field of view value. The problem with this is it's perceived by antiviruses as a malicious feature. Of course, we know that in this context, the feature is absolutely harmless and only serves to force a setting we otherwise could not change. So we're going to make sure Defender doesn't interfere with our ability to use it. First, we're going to create a folder for our third-party Resident Evil 7 tools. Remember where you left this folder, because we're going to use it a few times. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to tell Defender not to touch anything inside that folder by creating an exclusion. Search for Security in Windows. You'll see the Windows Security app come up on the right. Click Virus and Threat Protection. Scroll to Virus and Threat Protection Settings and click Manage Settings. Scroll all the way down to Exclusions and click Add or Remove Exclusions. Click the Add Exclusion button and pick Folder. Now navigate to the folder we created in the step before, then press the Select Folder button. Now hit the back arrow in the top left to return to the Virus and Threat Protection settings. Disable real-time protection. We're only going to do this temporarily, and even if we forget to turn this back on, Windows will eventually do it automatically. Now, with real-time protection off, it's time to download the RE7 FOV trainer. There's going to be a link to this tool in the description. After you've downloaded, extract the contents of this file into the folder we created an exclusion for earlier. Look in the description for the archive password if there is one. Now that we have the trainer in a safe spot, go ahead and turn real-time protection back on. There's one last annoying thing we need to do for Windows to allow the FOV trainer to run. From the Virus and Threat Protection Settings window, click App and Browser Control on the left. Set the Check Apps and Files setting to off. This Windows feature is called Smart Screen, and that's not right. It should be called Stupid Blind or just straight up fuck you. All it does is prevent legitimate apps from running without ever actually intercepting any threats. I recommend leaving it off permanently, but this is entirely up to you. You will, however, need to at least turn this horrific feature off temporarily if you want to use the RE7 FOV trainer. Leave yourself a window with the contents of our Resident Evil 7 tools open. We're going to need it while we're running the game. Now that we're all set to run the FOV trainer, we're ready to play some Resident Evil 7 in VR. Assuming you've done the steps in the game preparation section of this video, launch Resident Evil 7 while VorpX is ready to go with our VR runtimes, either SteamVR or Oculus. Load a game or start a new one, get through any cutscenes you've got to watch, and get to a point where you're given controls, standing in the game world in a spot without adversity, free to go about your setup with no rude interruptions. Press the Delete key to bring up the VorpX settings. Under Main Settings, we're going to want 3D separation strength to come down to 0.55. Next, expand the More Stereo 3D settings and set 3D FOV enhancement all the way down to 0. Set Camera Height Modifier to 0.15. Yes, this is strange, but we'll explain why in the Issues and Tricks section of this guide. Next, under Image Settings, set Image Zoom to 0.81. This setting isn't very high, but it will give you the best image detail possible with the trade-off of barely visible edges at the top and bottom of your view. Finally, under Image Settings, HUD Scale should be at 0.45 and HUD Depth at 0.6. Go ahead and hit OK and save. We're going to launch the FOV trainer. While the game is running in VR through VorpX, use Alt and Tab to navigate to the window with the contents of our Resident Evil 7 tools. Launch the FOV trainer and enter a value of 120 and then press Enter. Keep in mind, you're going to have to do this every time you use the FOV trainer. Enter the value and press Enter. Then use Alt and Tab again to switch back to the game. Once you're back in the game, press your F1 key. Voila, now we have a proper field of view that is not only far more suitable for virtual reality, but it's being produced without a series of ugly graphical glitches and works considerably smoother. If you intend on playing with this method and are happy with it, you're done. I highly suggest skipping to the Issues and Tricks section of this video, where I will show you a strange but efficient solution to work around the issue of the cutout texture around the hands and weapon models. If you want an even better setup, well then keep watching. For this third method, I need to bring up Ruined Eraser, aka Civil Wolf again. This method would not exist had I not decided to finally reach out to him. See, Ruined Eraser built another tool called the RE7 Aspect Ratio Patcher. It's a tool that could supposedly allow Resident Evil 7 to run at different aspect ratios without having black bars and scaling problems. Sadly, every time I tried to use it, it didn't seem to give the desired result. Fast forward to 2021, where I finally realized it just seems this patcher was made to widen the aspect ratio while not being able to make it any taller. So I found Ruined Eraser on Twitter, and I kindly asked if it would be an easy fix to make the patcher work both ways rather than just one. He informed me that it would be rather easy, and then got back to me the very next day with an updated patcher that I quickly confirmed could indeed now do vertically and horizontally expanded aspects. Next up, I merrily took the updated patcher and ran the game through VorpX, and I made a few configuration changes, and wow, absolutely wow, did it look amazing. Until I tilted my head. God damn it, the game was gradually stretching the image out vertically the more I would tilt my head. This would make the image look diagonally skewed and thus render the game impossible to play without feeling like you're on a boat about to die from scurvy. So I reached out to the VorpX developers asking if this new problem could be fixed. Sure enough, I got a reply back saying that this could be patched, something that would be done within a week. Yes, not only did Ruined Eraser instantly pull through, but so did VorpX themselves. All I can say is thank you so very much to both of you. I swear I've never seen a game as stubborn as this, with so many usually easy to implement options being nearly impossible to force into this one. I cannot thank Ruined Eraser and VorpX enough for finally helping to unlock the full potential this game has in VR on the PC. Now, we're going to do the next steps with the assumption that you've watched the instructions for the second method. If you haven't watched those, go back. They are crucial to the third method. We're going to be running a version of the game modified by the patcher, and we're going to stack the FOV trainer on top of it. This will give us the correct aspect ratio for VR, along with the best field of view possible, and thus the best pixel density we've ever seen this game run at to date on any system ever. Now, it's a bit of a pain in the ass to set up, because again, this game is stubborn as hell, but if you perform the setup once, that's it. You'll be good for a while. First, download the Aspect Patcher. This tool will not trip Windows Defender like the Field of View Trainer does, but we're going to extract it in the folder we created for Resident Evil 7 tools earlier, just so we keep all of these in the same place. It comes with an executable file and a data file. Go ahead and run the executable. First, the tool will ask you for your screen width. The specifics don't matter, we just need to give it a 4:3 aspect resolution. Just enter 1920 and press enter. For the height, enter 1440 and press enter. The patcher will then prompt you to locate the game's executable file. The typical location of this file is shown on the screen and will be in the description of the video. Once you've picked up the game's executable, the patcher will modify it, create a backup, at which point you can press enter again to close the tool. Keep in mind, if anything ever goes south during this process, the tool created a file called re7.exe.backup. You can simply restore this file if you need to undo this process. The problem we're going to run into now is that unless our desktop actively supports 4:3 resolutions, which it probably does not, the game itself won't offer us any worthy options. That's right, the high-end resolutions the game offers are directly sourced from what your system supports, so we have to convince the game we've got good 4:3 resolutions. We're going to have to add custom resolutions to our system, and we're going to do it using NVIDIA's Dynamic Super Resolution feature, along with a third-party tool that will let us add custom resolutions. Keep in mind that since I cannot test the version of this process for AMD graphics cards, we won't be able to demonstrate how to add custom resolutions for AMD, as I would have no way to validate the process itself. There is a tool known as Custom Resolution Utility by ToastyX that seems to be able to accomplish custom resolutions for AMD. If anyone is willing to give this a try, I'm willing to post a follow-up video showing how to do this on systems with AMD graphics. Let me know in the comments below and I'll reply to the good leads I see. If you're planning on playing at an aspect ratio of 4:3 at the lowest resolution available for this process, that being 1400 by 1050, you will not need to use DSR, as that resolution is already in the game. For 1600 by 1200 or 1920 by 1440, listen up. For NVIDIA, this bit is not difficult. First, enable DSR on your system. If you did not enable DSR in the game preparation segment of this video, go back and follow those instructions. Then download a tool called Custom DSR Tool. There will be, as usual, a link in the description. Extract those files into a folder. Now, with your system running at your monitor's native resolution, for example, in my case it's 1920 by 1080, launch Custom DSR Tool. Don't launch it while you're using a DSR resolution. You'll see the DSR resolution you've already enabled, if any. We're going to add a custom resolution in one of the empty slots. First, let's check one of the empty slots and then click Edit Entry. Enter your resolution dimensions in Target Resolution X and Target Resolution Y and make sure it's at a 4:3 aspect ratio. For the exact values, you have 3 possible options. Note also that the 4:3 aspect requirements are slightly lower. 1400 by 1050 for low, to be used on systems with a GTX 1060 or greater. 1600 by 1200 for medium, to be used on systems with a GTX 1070 or greater. And finally, 1920 by 1440 for high, suitable for those with a GTX 1080 or greater. Once you enter those numbers in Target Resolution X and Y, hit OK. Finally, click Create DSR Resolutions at the bottom of the window. Your resolution will now have been added. If you change your NVIDIA settings at any point in the future, these custom resolutions will reset. When that happens, just reopen Custom DSR Tool and repeat this process. Keep in mind, if you plan on playing at a resolution greater than your monitor's native resolution, you will need to use DSR to enable a larger resolution on your desktop. For example, I'm going to be launching at 1920 by 1440, while my native resolution is only 1920 by 1080. So I'm going to want to switch that desktop over to a larger resolution. In my case, I'm going for a DSR resolution of 2560 by 1440, which matches my monitor's aspect ratio while fitting the 1920 by 1440 game window. When I'll be done playing, I can easily revert back to 1920 by 1080. Now, without VorpX running, launch Resident Evil 7. We're going to change the resolution to a 4:3 aspect without causing issues with VorpX. If you've covered the steps in the game preparation section of this video, your game is already running in windowed mode and it probably looks a little weird right now. Go in the graphics options and select the 4:3 resolution you've opted to go with, either 1400 by 1050 or the higher resolution we added in DSR earlier. In my case, I'm obviously going for 1920 by 1440. Set resolution scale to 1 for 1920 by 1440 or 1600 by 1200, and set resolution scale to 1.1 for 1400 by 1050. That's it. At this point, our resolution is set and the game will now appear with the proper aspect. Exit this menu and quit the game. We're ready to do our VorpX configuration. This time, with VorpX running along with your VR runtimes, either SteamVR or Oculus, go ahead and launch Resident Evil 7 one last time. Load or start a game and make it to a point where no cutscenes are playing and where you'll have full controls without any adversity that could rudely interrupt you. Press the Delete key to bring up the VorpX settings window. First, under Main Settings, change 3D Separation Strength to 0.7. Next, expand More Stereo 3D Settings and then set 3D FOV Enhancement all the way down to 0. Change Camera Height Modifier to 0.15. This is unusual, but you'll see why we do this in the Issues and Tricks section of this guide. Next, go to Image Settings and set Image Zoom to a value of 0.81. Set HUD Scale to 0.35. Yeah, that's low. Don't worry though, it'll still be visible. Thank you, 4:3 aspect. And finally, set HUD Depth at 0.6. Hit OK and save to keep those changes. While the game is running in VR through VorpX, use Alt and Tab to navigate to the window with the contents of our Resident Evil 7 tools, as described in the second method instructions. Launch the FOV trainer, enter a value of 103 and press Enter. Then use Alt and Tab again to switch back to the game. Once you're back in the game, press your F1 key. Voila, we now have a proper field of view with a proper aspect ratio. This is now the best possible rendition of Resident Evil 7 on the PC in VR. We've got the right field of view, we no longer waste pixels, and finally we're getting even smoother performance. That being said, this is a third-party VR adaptation and it's never perfect. Let's go over a few of the issues you might run into, along with any workarounds I can propose, notably the one to hide the terrible cutout texture around the hand models and weapons. I'm going to get right to the point because you came here to ask about the stupid cutout around the hand and weapon models, and you've come to the right place. This game's VorpX profile comes with positional tracking enabled. Originally, when I played this game, I minimized the cutout problem by simply disabling positional tracking. It's a simple solution, but you're still going to see a little bit of the cutout, just at least it won't block half your view like it does with positional tracking on. But wait, leave positional tracking on because we've got an even better solution. Remember how we made you set camera height modifier to 0.15? This is where that setting ties in. The height modifier will get the cutout out of the way vertically. We just need to also get it out of the way horizontally. Lean backwards from your intended play posture by about 6 inches. Then press Alt and Space, which is the hotkey to recenter VorpX tracking. After recentering, lean back into your normal posture. That's it. With this trick, you've pushed the cutout texture down with camera height and pushed it backwards by leaning back while recentering. Like this, the cutout issue becomes so hard to notice, you'll even forget it exists for long periods of time. The cutout will still be visible around objects you pick up to inspect, so it won't be completely out of sight, but enduring it for those brief moments isn't a big deal, and more importantly, it doesn't affect gameplay in any critical way. Keep in mind that every single time you open a menu in this game, you're going to want to enable Edge Peek. Press your middle mouse button to enable it, and press it again to disable it once you're done. The action sometimes doesn't register right away, so I find myself having to click the middle mouse button a few times before it finally wakes up and switches over to Edge Peek. Something cool with this game is it doesn't seem to mind having its resolution changed on the fly with VorpX. If you're looking to compare setups, you can actually switch resolutions while playing. Of course, you need to make sure you only use 16:9 resolutions if using methods 1 and 2, and only 4:3 resolutions if you're using method number 3. Lastly, a less prominent issue that I wasn't able to resolve, there's a sort of checker pattern shadow that sometimes appears on the outer edges of your view. I'm not sure what causes it, but I haven't been able to get rid of it. Fortunately, it's not a major eyesore. I just wanted to point it out in case you finally notice it and wonder if you did something wrong. The 4:3 configuration we demonstrate in method 3 tries to balance pixel density and viewport size. It's possible that you notice a tiny slither of an edge at the top and bottom of the game view. If this bothers you, you can try an alternate FOV and image zoom combination. In the FOV trainer, use a value of 110 instead of 103. In VorpX image settings, use 0.88 instead of 0.81 for image zoom. This configuration will not have visible edges, but the trade-off will be reduced pixel density and image clarity. Keep in mind that methods 2 and 3 heavily depend on third-party tools. At any point, it's possible that some of these, notably the FOV trainer and the aspect ratio patcher, become out of date when Capcom gets bored and pushes an update that breaks their ability to work. Whenever this happens, you can revert to the first method demonstrated in this video while you wait for the tools to be updated once more. Something that usually happens rather quickly, sometimes within a matter of days. I'll make sure to keep the links to these tools up to date in both the description of this video and the PDF document featuring the instructions for this game. Despite never having actually finished Resident Evil 7 in its entirety, it's become quite a headline on my channel since I first released that VorpX tutorial. It's also become a game I've become quite fond of revisiting. I've now played it for about a dozen hours on the PC with VorpX and another 4 hours on PlayStation VR. In my opinion, it embodies exactly the type of content that is instantly augmented by VR. This game is already terrifying enough to play on a monitor. The sense of fright is astronomically multiplied when you take that experience, wrap it around you 360 degrees, add depth perception, and the sense of not having any recourse to comforting reality, and you've got yourself one of the most effective horror entertainment on the planet right there. Now, we've taken this up another notch by finally having a PC VR adaptation that is graphically superior to the PSVR rendition. Having this game run more efficiently in a 4:3 aspect ratio makes a huge difference, and finally the level of clarity we're getting is at par with a lot of popular first-party VR titles. It's not a perfect adaptation by any means, but it's a setup that definitely gives you a worthy PC VR variant of Resident Evil 7. Time to give you a vScore rating for Resident Evil 7. Now, the scores for methods 1 and 2 still stand and are detailed in the first and second video tutorials respectively. To summarize, method 1 gets a vScore of 79, while method 2 lands a vScore of 86. Now let's evaluate method 3. The rating is on a scale of 100 and is based on 8 criteria along with a penalty value if necessary. The first category of 4 criteria are the requirements. These are the high-value elements required to provide an authentic VR experience. Having an acceptable 3D reconstruction method is worth 30 points because no 3D means no depth perception and kinda no VR at all. Next, proper geometry 3D brings a game to life by providing the only authentic stereoscopic 3D method, so 10 points for that. Resident Evil 7 has no issues with the stereoscopic 3D, so it gets all the points for these too. Next, proper head tracking, which is important. Unreliable tracking can destroy a VR experience, is worth 15 points in total. This head tracking isn't pitch-level direct VR smoothness, but it's actually very good. The default head tracking sensitivity works well with the default mouse sensitivity. I'm going to award the game its full 15 points here. VR requires games running with sufficient field of view, and because of the various ways we can achieve this, some more effective and some less, this is worth up to 15 points. Obviously, we've got help from the FOV trainer in method 3, so we have no problems here. Full score for the field of view. The second category of 4 criteria are the features. This covers desirable features with games running on VorpX regarding graphics and rendering. With third-party VR, it's hard to come by proper shadows and graphics effects across the board. Dynamic shadows often cause issues, and some effects might render incorrectly. A game can gain up to 10 points based on this aspect. Resident Evil 7 is practically perfect in this regard. There isn't a single shadow out of place. Only a few effects here and there that don't jive, but they're very rare. We're giving the game a 10 on this one. Proper 3D hands and weapon models are very hard to find in third-party VR. It's quite rare, but it does get a game up to 5 points for getting it right. Now that we've managed to get the stupid cutout out of the way, I've raised the score of all 3 methods by 1 point. I almost put a 5 here, but I remembered we do sometimes still see the cutout issue, so I can't fully dismiss it. A proper user interface and heads-up display means being able to see your health, ammo count, and such, and it means being able to navigate menus. Up to 5 points for how a game handles a heads-up display. The game gains a point here with this method. Yes, most of the menus are only visible through edge peek, but man, the 4:3 aspect sure does help this game a lot with the in-game HUD, to the point where it's starting to look like the thing was made for VR. 4 points for this criteria. Direct VR makes the process of setting up a game much easier and often delivers the perfect head tracking. Based on how a game supports it, it can get up to 10 points in bonus. Yes, Direct VR sets some options for us here, but its 2 main fortes, head tracking and field of view, are not applicable here, so I'm leaving a 0. Finally, outside of our 2 scoring categories, we have the good old penalty criteria. The penalty criteria is here to offset a game's score due to glitches or major issues. Up to 10 points can be withdrawn. Guess what? There used to be a -1 here, but with this method, there isn't any penalty. That's right, the game looks so much better with the 4:3 aspect that we've got ourselves an image density capable of even defeating this game's terrible anti-aliasing filters. No penalty points for Resident Evil 7 in Method 3. Resident Evil 7 with Method 3 gets a vScore of 88. For a manual VR setup, that's quite the score. That may actually be our highest vScore for a manual VR setup to date. It may not be representative of this game's weakness, inconsistent performance, but with a setup that's this scalable, you're bound to find a way to enjoy this title at its very best. And that's it for Resident Evil 7 with VorpX. Remember, if you need reference for these instructions, there's a PDF document that details everything we demonstrated in this video, linked at the top of the description. Keep in mind that when tools get updated, if the download links are altered or any of the instructions change, the document will be the first thing kept up to date. On that note, I've got a couple of new VorpX investigations going. I already knocked BioShock Infinite out of the way by realizing I don't need to update that tutorial. I simply put a link to a PDF document detailing the new instructions for that game at the top of the description of its old tutorial video. The setup for that game has become so simple, the instructions barely fill 1 paragraph. I highly encourage you to take a look at that. It's another amazing game to play with VorpX. The vScore on that one is 96 right now. Last but not least, if you like this new PDF document thing we've got going since our last tutorial, let me know in the comments. One of our biggest complaints with tutorial videos is viewers don't like having to go through the context and elaboration all the time. They just want their instructions, and the document hopefully takes care of that well. The instructions for this game in particular are brutal, and I've got a feeling that PDF is going to come in handy. Alright, you've been watching Stereo 3D Productions, finally updating you on Resident Evil 7 with VorpX. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.